What is the outlook for temperatures and precipitation during the upcoming winter months of December through February? Joining us more on the outlook, factors influencing the weather this winter, and new ways we will be notified of extreme cold is Warning Coordination Meteorologist Mike Moritz of the Hastings National Weather Service. Mike, how is it looking for temperatures this upcoming winter?
Well, it's always tricky when you look out 2, 3, 4 months ahead, and the official forecast calls for equal chances of above, below, or near normal temperatures. However, I think we should probably actually lean a little cooler than normal. I think December will be cooler than normal, even though we've had some cold spells in January the past couple years. I just think that overall 3-month period, we probably won't be as warm as we've seen in the last, say, 5 to 7 years.
Mike, can we expect to see much in the way of precipitation during the winter months of December, January, and February?
Well, as hard as temperatures are to forecast, precipitation's even harder. I think we kind of all know that. It is so variable. There aren't a lot of strong trends this winter, so right now, our official forecast is for equal chances of above, below, and near normal precipitation. I think in general, the winter will probably settle out with about normal snowfall for most areas. I also think we'll see snow a little earlier than we've seen the past few years, again, owing to the cooler temperatures. But I do think most of our snow probably comes in January and February, and pretty typical winter is how I would look at it.
After widespread drought reducing rains this past weekend, Mike, how do the upcoming months look for further drought reduction?
It really quite an interesting fall. I mean, we've had very little rain across the region in September and through most of October, and that just belabored some of our dry conditions lingering from the summers. Drought had spread across the state. It had worsened, especially in the Northeast and the far west. And then we opened up the spigot a little bit here the last couple weeks, and we're seeing, I'll say, improvement, but we're certainly not seeing drastic improvement. We're just trying to catch up right now. Typically, we don't get a lot of moisture in the late fall and winter, so any time that we can get a 1-inch or a 2-inch or more rain, especially rain, we can soak that in. We can start replenishing the profile for the spring. We do have a little ways to go. Drought changes during the winter, unless we see a tremendous amount of snow, typically aren't that great. So I'm not looking for a lot of an improvement over the winter.
And Mike, as we headed to the final weeks of November, how are things looking for maybe our first chance of snow?
We expect a fairly significant weather system on the 18th and 19th. That would be Monday and Tuesday. This is going to be a fairly widespread rain the way it looks. Once that system kind of pulls through later Tuesday, there are some signs that it could stall a little bit and some moisture could wrap around from the northwest. It will also be colder by then as well, and that could bring maybe a mixture of snow to the region. It doesn't look like anything significant at this time. I think the most important factor with that system as we get into the 18th and 19th is the widespread rain potential. Again, this could be a 2-incher or more for some areas of Nebraska and Kansas. More beneficial rain is really what we need.
Talking right now with Mike Moritz of the Hastings National Weather Service for more on what to expect during the upcoming winter months of December, January, and February. Mike, during recent winters, the pattern was either El Nino or La Nina. What pattern is emerging for this winter, and how does it usually influence our temperatures and precipitation?
Well, we do follow those patterns very closely, and we're just not quite there yet, but we anticipate the winter to be a weak La Nina. Typically on weak La Ninas, we tend to see a really wide spread of temperatures. We go from warm to cold, a lot of variability. We're kind of used to that. But the northern plains tends to lean a little colder. I do think we'll share in that slightly colder temperature regime. Precipitation is typically a little drier in La Nina, although again, I'm sticking with more of a near normal snow for the winter. It's not an overly impressive La Nina, so that makes it harder to give any sort of idea on a long-term outlook. We just need to be ready for our typical variable winter conditions across the region.
Slightly new terms will be used by the National Weather Service when notifying us about cold weather. Mike, what are those new terms?
The last few years, the National Weather Service has been doing some testing in the northern plains of North Dakota and Montana and Minnesota with extreme cold wording. What we're going to do this winter is we're going to change what people might hear during the extreme cold events. We've had some very cold periods the last couple of Januaries, 2-week periods with extremely low wind chills. But what we found is whether there's wind or not, when it's 30 below, and it's extremely cold. This winter, instead of hearing a wind chill advisory or a wind chill warning, people will hear terms like cold advisory or extreme cold warning, things like that. We're not saying the wind is going away. We're not taking that out of our forecast equation. We're just emphasizing that whether there's wind or not, when the temperature's below 15 or 20 below zero, or less than 30 below zero, those are extreme cold events. If you're outside, you need to prepare, and that's the point of the emphasizing the cold, say, versus the wind all the time.
Mike, when a winter storm approaches, are there any new terms that are going to be used by the Weather Service, and what are some steps that we should take to be winter weather ready?
In general, we're still focused on our usual winter storm warnings, our winter weather advisories, those types of things this winter. Those are there to give people a heads up as to what's coming. We look at a lot of different things, not just how much snow you might get. We're going to take into account the impacts of these events. Are they happening over a holiday weekend? Are they a long-term duration type of event? There's a lot of things that we look for. Really, what I would encourage people to do is follow the forecast routinely this time of year. It's not good enough to look at it once a week or just catch it here and there. When the weather is changing, the forecast changes too, and that's valuable information for how you can plan your life. If you're traveling, especially if you're traveling, you really need to watch that forecast close and prepare for the storm. And if it's a bad one, if it looks like it's not something you want to deal with, then stay home and don't deal with it. Let it pass by and go back to your life after that.
Thanks, Mike, for joining us. That's Warning Coordination Meteorologist Mike Moritz of the Hastings National Weather Service talking about the outlook for the upcoming winter. For updates, you can check the social media for the Weather Service offices in Hastings, North Platte, Goodland, and Valley. I'm Paul Perkins on the Rural Radio Network.